This is Heliox, where evidence meets empathy. Independent, moderated, timely, deep, gentle, clinical, global, and community conversations about things that matter. Breathe easy, we go deep and lightly surface the big ideas. I want you to close your eyes for a second. Well, assuming you're not driving, of course. Imagine you are sitting in the stands of a massive, roaring Roman amphitheater.
Right. We are talking about the absolute peak of the empire's excess.
Exactly. The sun is just beating down on you. The smell of dust, sweat, and that really distinct, sharp musk of exotic animals is hanging heavy and thick in the air.
Oh, yeah. And you're packed shoulder to shoulder with, tens of thousands of other screaming spectators.
The stone benches are literally vibrating beneath you from the sheer noise of the crowd. You're waiting for the next spectacle. And down on the arena floor, the heavy iron gates at the edge of the sand slowly, agonizingly grind open. The crowd holds its breath, and out walks a woman.
And, you really have to understand the immediate visual shock of this moment for a Roman audience.
Right, because she isn't bound in chains or anything.
Exactly. She isn't cowering or being pushed out by guards. She steps out into the blazing sunlight completely voluntarily.
Her hair is pulled back tight. She is topless.
Yes. And in one hand, she grips a long, curving whip. In the other, she holds the hilt of a short dagger.
And across the yellow sand of the arena, a leopard paces, its shoulders rolling, sizing her up.
And she locks eyes with this apex predator, completely ready, completely equipped to face it down.
It is such a staggeringly cinematic image. And what's fascinating is how violently it clashes with the textbook picture we usually have of women in ancient Rome.
Oh, absolutely. The paragon of domestic virtue.
Yeah. If you go to a museum or read a standard history book, the Roman woman is almost always portrayed sequestered in the home. She is weaving at a loom, managing the household slaves, operating strictly behind the scenes.
You certainly do not picture her standing half naked in the Colosseum, weapon in hand, willingly stepping into the path of a leaping feline.
No, not at all. It shatters the illusion of the monolithic, passive Roman woman. But the truth is, historians have known for centuries that this textbook picture was incomplete, right?
Yes. We've actually always had ancient texts, snatches of poetry, historical accounts, legal documents, and they explicitly mention women fighting wild beasts in the arena.
So intellectually, we knew they were there.
Right. The Roman historian Cassius Dio writes about them. The poet Martial mentions them in his epigrams.
But there's a massive difference between reading a poem about something and actually seeing it. It's like reading a medieval description of a dragon versus, finding a photograph of one.
That's a great way to put it. And for hundreds of years of archaeology, through all the massive excavations across Europe and North Africa, historians never found a single image.
Wow.
Not one statue, not one mosaic, actually showing one of these women in action. It was always just words on a page.
Until now. Which brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We're going to look at a recently published academic paper by the historian Alfonso Manas.
Yeah, Manas acts essentially as an ancient cold case detective here. He went back into the archives and uncovered, then meticulously proved the existence of the very first and currently the only known visual evidence of a female Roman beast fighter.
Or, to use the proper terminology,
Venatrix.
Yeah.
The Romans called a male arena hunter a venator. The feminine form the term we'll be using today to describe this highly trained, specialized fighter is a Venatrix.
A Venatrix. It's a title that carries an incredible amount of weight. But for you, the listener, we need to establish exactly what the stakes are here. Why does finding one picture of a Venatrix matter so much? We already had the texts confirming they existed. Why is this specific visual discovery sending shockwaves through the historical community?
Well, because this single piece of evidence forces us to completely rewrite the timeline of women in the Roman arena.
Oh, so.
Prior to this paper, the established historical consensus was that female arena huntresses, these Venatrices, effectively vanished from the historical record shortly after the year 100 AD.
Okay, and we also know for a fact, legally speaking, that female gladiators, women who fought other humans with swords, were strictly banned later on.
Yes, unequivocally banned by the Emperor Septimius Severus in the year 200 AD. So historians naturally assumed the book was closed.
The empire became more conservative, and women were entirely pushed out of the blood sports.
That was the assumption. But the image Manas analyzes It undeniably dates to the 3rd century.
That is a massive paradigm shift. We're talking about an entire century after the ban on female gladiators.
At least 100 years. This one visual artifact proves that the female presence in the arena was far more enduring, far more stubborn, and far more complex than we ever realized.
And it's not just about pushing dates around on a timeline.
No, not at all. This investigation opens up a profound and frankly quite uncomfortable conversation about Roman psychology. It forces us to examine how they weaponized public morality, their intense cultural hypocrisy, and the bizarre loopholes they created regarding what was considered acceptable violence for a woman.
Right. So to really understand how this image survived and how it was almost lost to us forever, we have to step out of ancient Rome for a moment and travel to Reims, a city in northeastern France in the year 1860.
Yes. This is the birthplace of the artifact at the center of our investigation, the Reims Mosaic. On November 3, 1860, construction workers in Reims were excavating a site when they hit something solid in the earth.
And as they carefully brushed away the dirt, they revealed something that absolutely took the breath away from the local archaeological community.
It was a remarkably intact, incredibly lavish Roman mosaic floor. The scale of it is hard to overstate. It measured roughly 11 meters by 9 meters.
Which is effectively the size of a modern tennis court just buried under a French city.
Yeah, and we aren't just talking about a few geometric patterns. From the descriptions in the source material, the central portion of this floor was a massive, highly structured grid, divided into 35 individual medallions.
It was a monumental achievement in craftsmanship. Mosaics of this size required immense wealth and specialized labor. Artisans had to cut and place tens of thousands of tiny colored stones called tesserae to create intricate, lifelike images.
Exactly. And in this specific mosaic, inside every single one of those 35 medallions was a detailed, full-color scene depicted against a stark white background.
It was, for all intents and purposes, a 3rd century graphic novel detailing the spectacles of the amphitheater.
It sounds like an absolute treasure trove. You've got medallions showing heavily armored gladiators locked in combat, men hunting bears with spears, leopards leaping through the air.
A complete visual catalog of Roman blood sport specifically commissioned by a wealthy Roman living in the province of Gaul.
It was the discovery of a lifetime. And a brilliant French archaeologist named Jean-Charles Lorquet immediately recognized its immense value. Lorquet rushed to the site in 1860.
But crucially, he didn't just marvel at it.
No, he understood that archaeology is inherently destructive and that exposed artifacts are incredibly fragile. So he sat down and methodically, painstakingly, drew every single one of those 35 medallions.
Wow.
He captured the nuanced posture of the fighters, the specific angles of their weapons, the anatomical details of the animals. He effectively preserved the entire 11 by 9 meter mosaic in ink.
And it is a profound historical miracle that he did. Because if you travel to Reims today hoping to buy a ticket to a museum and stand in front of this masterpiece to see the Venatrix for yourself, you can't.
No, you can't.
The physical mosaic does not exist anymore. It was completely violently erased from the historical record.
It is one of the great tragedies of modern archaeology. The mosaic was safely housed in a building in Reims for decades, but then came 1917 and the devastating artillery bombardments of World War I.
Right, Reims was heavily targeted.
During a bombing raid, a massive artillery shell scored a direct hit on the building housing the mosaic. In a fraction of a second, an artifact that had survived peacefully underground for 1,700 years was blown into absolute, irrecoverable dust.
There's a really dark irony there. A mosaic dedicated to ancient, localized violence was completely vaporized by the sheer scale of modern industrial violence.
It really is tragic. Out of an entire tennis court-sized floor, out of 35 intricately detailed scenes of combat, only one single tiny fragment of the physical mosaic survived the explosion.
Just one.
Just one. It is a small piece of a medallion depicting a heavily armored gladiator, specifically a type of gladiator known as a Reims.
And that single charred fragment of stone is currently kept behind glass in a museum in Reims. But the rest of it, the bears, the leopards, the hunters, and the Venatrix, is just gone.
Which brings us back to Lorquet's drawings. In 1862, 2 years after the initial discovery and decades before the bombs fell, he published a comprehensive book containing his study and all of his meticulous sketches.
But here is the part of the story that absolutely blows my mind. The original physical evidence is destroyed. We have this perfect backup copy in Lorquet's book. But instead of studying it, the academic world just forgot about it.
It fell into a complete historiographical blind spot.
Why?
Well, you have to remember, This was a highly specialized 19th century text written in French, sitting quietly on the shelves of local municipal archives. Throughout the entire 20th century, even as public and academic interest in gladiators exploded.
Right, think of the massive cultural moment when Ridley Scott's movie Gladiator came out in 2000.
Exactly. International scholars were constantly debating the existence of female fighters. And all the while, the definitive visual proof was just sitting in a dusty book in France, completely unexamined by modern eyes.
It's almost as if someone found the original handwritten sheet music to a lost, unrecorded Beatles song, meticulously copied all the notes down, and then the original paper was thrown into a fire. We had the copy of the notes for over a century, but nobody bothered to actually sit down at a piano and play the song to hear what it sounded like.
That is a brilliant way to frame it. Alfonso Manas, the author of our source paper, is the guy who finally sat down at the piano.
He went into those French archives, pulled Loriquet's 1862 book, and applied modern, rigorous analytical techniques to what was drawn there.
And what he found hidden in the drawing of medallion number 11 is the linchpin of this entire discovery.
Okay, we're going to pause right here. We need to take a quick break, but when we come back, we're going to dive into the actual sketch of Medallion 11. Inside Loriquet's accurate drawings is a mystery figure that baffled the archaeologist himself. Is it a man or is it a woman? We are going to crack the visual code right after this. Don't go away.
Stay with us.
And we are back with our deep dive into the lost Reims Mosaic.
Yes, we are.
Okay, so before the break, we mentioned Manas looking at medallion number 11. But if I'm you, the listener, and I'm following this chain of evidence, I am waving a massive, glowing red flag right now.
Go for it.
We are about to base a massive historical paradigm shift, the rewriting of the timeline of women in the Roman arena, on a sketch made by a Victorian-era French archaeologist in 1862.
That's their concern.
Look, armor is geometric and rigid. It's relatively easy to accurately copy a straight sword or a rectangular shield. But human anatomy in ancient art is incredibly fluid, stylized, and subjective. How do we know Loriquet didn't just look at some damaged, ambiguous tiles and essentially hallucinate a female form because of his own cultural biases, or a trick of the light on the surviving stones? Isn't relying on a 19th century drawing academically dangerous?
It is the single most critical vulnerability in the entire argument, and Manas addresses it head-on with a masterful piece of comparative forensics. You bring up the rigidity of armor, which is the exact key to solving this.
Okay, how?
Remember that single solitary physical fragment of the mosaic that actually survived the 1917 bombing, the Reims Gladiator?
Right, the one fragment sitting in the museum in Reims.
We have the physical 3rd century stone fragment of that gladiator. And we have Loriquet's 1862 drawing of that exact same gladiator. When you place them side by side, the comparison is breathtaking.
They match.
The drawing isn't just an approximation, it is a virtually flawless one-to-one replica. Every single strap of leather armor, the precise angle of the curved sword, the exact positioning of the limbs, the specific number of crests on the helmet, it all matches perfectly.
Oh, wow.
Loriquet wasn't an artist taking romantic 19th century creative liberties. He was operating like a human photocopier.
Okay, so the surviving fragment acts as an ironclad control group.
Exactly. It proves beyond a shadow of a doubt that Loriquet's methodology was intensely literal and highly accurate. He drew exactly what was laid down in stone, nothing more, nothing less. Therefore, if he was that obsessive about capturing the exact straps on the gladiator's leg, we can trust with a very high degree of academic certainty that his drawing of the mystery figure in Medallion 11 faithfully portrays the specific anatomical details the 3rd century artist intended to show.
Consider my skepticism officially dismantled. The drawings are a valid primary source. So let's put on our forensic gloves and look closely at the drawing of Medallion 11. What exactly did the Romans see fit to immortalize in stone, and what did Loriquet draw?
When you isolate Medallion 11, you see a figure standing in profile. The first thing you notice is that the figure is entirely beardless.
Okay.
Their right arm is extended aggressively forward, firmly gripping a long, curving whip that arcs through the air. In their left hand, held closely to the hip, you can clearly see the pommel, the handle, of a secondary weapon.
Which is likely a short dagger or perhaps a specialized heavy cloth.
Right. And based on the narrative flow of the surrounding medallions, this figure is using the whip to actively drive a large leopard toward another, more heavily armed hunter positioned to the left.
So we have a beardless figure with a whip and a dagger actively managing a leopard in the arena. When Loriquet originally looked at this in 1860, sitting in the dirt with his sketchbook, did he immediately recognize what he was looking at? Did he say, aha, I found a female beast fighter?
No, he didn't. In fact, Loriquet was deeply baffled by what he was drawing. When he published his findings in 1862, he actively avoided assigning a definitive gender to the figure.
Really? What did he call it?
In his French commentary, he used the neuter term personage, simply a personage or character. He was careful to note that the face was beardless, which was an incredibly relevant detail because in the stylistic vocabulary of this specific mosaic, every other bareheaded male figure is explicitly drawn with a thick, clearly defined beard.
But just lacking a beard isn't a smoking gun for female identity. Men can shave. It could be depicting a very young male athlete or an adolescent boy apprenticing in the arena.
Which is exactly why Loriquet hesitated. He notes the hairstyle, which is pulled back in a somewhat intricate fashion, but again, athletic men could have long hair tied back.
So what was the detail that really threw him?
The physical anomaly he couldn't ignore, but was too academically cautious to fully commit to, was the chest. Deep in the footnotes of his book, Loriquet consciously wrote that the arrangement of the hair and the protruding form of the chest seemed to authorize the supposition that she is a woman.
But he left it right there. A mere hesitant supposition.
A 19th century academic shoulder shrug. He saw it, he noted it, but he wasn't going to risk his reputation declaring he had found the impossible.
But Alfonso Manas, applying modern visual analysis in our source paper, zeroes right in on that chest.
He does. Manas strips away the 19th century hesitation and lays out the definitive anatomical proof.
What does he see?
When you look closely at Loriquet's meticulously faithful drawing, the figure is clearly depicted topless. And the breasts, specifically the right breast, which is angled outward toward the viewer in profile, are distinctly and undeniably prominent.
So the original Roman artist intentionally arranged the tiny tesserae stones to create a remarkable, unmistakable outward curve, a protruding, pointy shape. I have to play devil's advocate here again, because even if Loriquet drew exactly what was there, we've all seen ancient art where the human anatomy is just wonky. Perspective was different, stylization was heavy. Could this just be a very poorly executed, exaggerated pectoral muscle on a male athlete? Maybe the artist was great at drawing leopards, but terrible at drawing men's chests?
It's a vital question.
Yeah.
If we only had this one medallion floating in isolation, the wonky anatomy argument might hold weight. But Manas again relies on the brilliance of the mosaic's broader context. We have a massive built-in control group.
The rest of the mosaic.
There are dozens of other bare-chested male figures depicted in the exact same mosaic.
Yeah.
They're drawn by the exact same Roman workshop, likely the exact same artist, using the exact same visual vocabulary. And when you look at those male hunters, the artist drew them with perfectly flat, anatomically standard male chests.
Just straight vertical lines dropping down from the collarbone to the abdomen.
Yeah.
Okay, that entirely changes the context. The artist absolutely knew how to draw a standard male pectoral muscle and chose to do so repeatedly and consistently across the rest of the floor.
Precisely. Which means the prominent, protruding breast on the figure in Medallion 11 was not a mistake of proportion. It was a highly intentional, deliberate choice.
You have to think about how visual communication works in ancient art. The artist had a limited set of tools to convey complex information to an observer who might be walking across the floor.
Right. A lack of a beard or specific hairstyle might be ambiguous from 10 feet away. The only guaranteed, universally unmistakable way to signal to the viewer, hey, pay attention, this specific fighter is a woman, was to explicitly emphasize her breasts.
The anatomical difference wasn't an artistic error, it was the focal point of the entire medallion. The control group seals it. The artist knew the rules and intentionally broke them for this one figure.
We are definitively, unequivocally looking at a woman, the first and only visual proof of a Venatrix.
But establishing her gender instantly unlocks an even bigger mystery. What exactly is her job? If you're standing in the arena holding a whip and staring down a leopard, what role are you playing?
Defining her precise role requires us to dismantle a lot of older theories, because over the decades, the few scholars who did glance at Loriquet's drawing struggled to categorize her. Loriquet himself originally labeled the figure an agitator.
An agitator. That sounds like someone whose sole job is just to run around whipping the animals to make them angry and aggressive, to put on a more terrifying show for the crowd.
That was exactly Loriquet's assumption. He imagined a lower-tier class of amphitheater staff whose job was merely provocation. But Manas points out a massive, fatal linguistic flaw in that theory.
What is it?
In the entire corpus of Roman history, across thousands of surviving stone inscriptions, legal texts, and detailed rosters of amphitheater personnel, the term adjugator is never ever used in the context of the arena or animal hunts. It was a highly specific term used exclusively for chariot drivers in the Circus Maximus.
So calling her an agitator in the amphitheater is like calling a modern football player a jockey.
The term simply doesn't belong to the sport.
Strike one for the older scholars. So she's not an agitator. But reading through the source paper, I saw another historian, Kazek, who looked at the drawings much more recently, around 2012. Kazek suggested she was something called a penurious. What is that?
The Paetinarius is one of the most fascinating and bizarre roles in the Roman arena. They were essentially comic clown gladiators. The word comes from the Greek pinion, which means a toy, a joke, or a comic performance.
Like halftime entertainment.
Exactly. When the crowd was fatigued from the sheer grim lethality of the actual executions and gladiator bouts, the Paetinariae would come out. They didn't use sharp metal weapons. They fought each other with blunt wooden sticks, and they were famously known for wearing thick, heavy padding wrapped entirely around their left arms to absorb the blows.
It was slapstick violence meant to elicit laughs, not blood. Okay, a clown gladiator. I can see why a historian might look at an unarmored figure with a whip and think, novelty act. But why does Manas argue that Kazek's theory is entirely wrong?
Because the woman in Medallion 11 lacks literally every defining characteristic of a Paetinarius.
How so?
She isn't holding a wooden stick, she's holding a whip and the hilt of a lethal weapon. She doesn't have the signature heavy padding wrapped around her arm. Her arms are completely bare. But most importantly, it's about the context of the opponent.
Paetinari fought other Paetinari to create a physical comedy routine.
Yes, our woman is not fighting a clown. She is locked in an active engagement with a massive, lethal leopard. There is absolutely nothing funny, comic, or safe about her situation. The task she is executing is deadly serious.
Strike two. Not an agitator, not a comic Paetinarius. So what is the actual historical title for what this woman is doing?
Manas reveals her true identity by cross-referencing the image with a very rare, highly specific Roman inscription found in the ruins of Pompeii. She is a Venatrix, a huntress. But more specifically, she belongs to an elite subcategory of arena hunters known as succursors. The singular form is a succursor.
A succursor. If we break down the Latin, that roughly translates to a helper or an assister, right?
Literally, yes.
Yeah.
But in the context of the arena, helper is a wildly inadequate translation.
Because a succursor was a highly specialized, incredibly agile, and deeply brave professional whose job was to manage the chaotic flow of a live animal hunt, a venatio.
Exactly. In the mosaic, she is using her whip not just to make the leopard angry, but to actively drive and redirect the beast's momentum toward the primary venator, the heavily armed hunter who would eventually deliver the killing spear thrust.
When I hear the word helper, I picture someone standing safely on the sidelines handing a mechanic a wrench. But what you're describing sounds exactly like the role of a modern-day rodeo clown or a bullfighter's assistant in a Spanish bull ring. When a bull rider gets bucked off and is lying vulnerable in the dirt, the rodeo clown, who is an elite, highly trained athlete, sprints directly into the path of a 2-ton bull to deliberately draw its attention. They are the ones managing the immediate lethal threat so the main event can continue.
That is a flawless modern analogy. In fact, the source paper points out that the inscription from Pompeii explicitly lists these succursors right alongside terrari, who were specialized, highly trained bullfighters.
These were not passive assistants. They were the frontline hazard manager.
They lit in the strike zone.
Yeah.
And we know for a fact that she is a genuine lethal Venatrix because of the equipment in her hands. She has the whip for range control, but in her left hand, tucked close to her body, she holds the pommel of a dagger, or perhaps a specialized heavy cloth used to blind or distract the feline, much like a matador's cape.
If the leopard turns on her instead of the main hunter, she is fully equipped and prepared for close quarters, lethal combat. It is an awe-inspiring image to hold in your mind. This woman, highly trained, dodging, weaving, and whipping a leopard, while tens of thousands of people scream in the background.
It is.
But as soon as we establish that she is in the arena with a wild animal, a massive, incredibly dark shadow falls over this entire investigation. We're going to take our second break, but when we return, we have to ask a terrifying question. She is a woman, and she is fighting a leopard. But is she a highly paid professional or a condemned prisoner about to die a horrific death? The answer lies in her missing clothes. We'll be right back.
Don't go away.
And we are back. We're deep diving into the lost Reims Mosaic and the only known visual evidence of a female Roman beast fighter.
And we just hit a very dark reality of the Roman arena.
We did, because the Roman amphitheater wasn't just a sports stadium. It was the primary venue for brutal state-sponsored executions.
Yes. And one of the most common, horrific methods of executing criminals, prisoners of war, and religious minorities, like the famous Christian martyrs Perpetua and Felicitas, was damnatio ad bestias, execution by wild animals.
The historical texts are full of accounts of women being stripped naked and thrown into the arena to be torn apart by bears and leopards for the crowd's amusement.
It was a horrific spectacle.
So if I'm looking at a drawing of a topless woman facing a leopard, my immediate visceral instinct is horror. How do we know she isn't just a terrified, condemned convict about to die an agonizing death?
It is the most vital, moral, and historical distinction we have to make, because the architecture of the arena was specifically designed to blur the line between human suffering and public entertainment.
Okay, so how do we know?
To answer your question, we have to look very closely at the obsessive, meticulous rules the Romans applied to their blood sports. The Romans were highly legalistic. Even in their cruelty, they had distinct, rigidly enforced categories for people facing beasts.
Right.
A venator, or Venatrix, was someone trained to hunt. They might be a free citizen doing it voluntarily for money and massive fame, or they might be a slave forced into the profession by their owner. But crucially, regardless of their legal status, they had a fighting chance. They were given training, and they were given weapons.
And the convicts, the people sentenced to damnatio ad bestias.
The convicts were the absolute antithesis of the hunter. The fundamental point of a damnatio sentence was that survival was not an option. The sentence was a public theatrical death. Therefore, the Romans absolutely, under no circumstances, gave weapons to the men and women sentenced to be executed by beasts.
Because to give a condemned prisoner a dagger or a whip would be to give them hope.
Exactly. It would give them a chance to fight back, to prolong the spectacle improperly, or even to attack the guards and executioners. That completely defeated the legal purpose of the punishment.
We have numerous visual sources, mosaics from Libya, terra sigillata pottery from across Gaul, that explicitly show women being executed by bears and felines.
And in every single one of those confirmed execution images, the women are completely, utterly unarmed.
So the fact that she has a weapon in her hand is the definitive key to her identity.
The weapon is the absolute, undeniable key. Our woman in Medallion 11 is actively wielding a whip, and she is holding the hilt of a dagger or a defense cloth. She is armed.
Therefore, legally and visually, she cannot possibly be a condemned convict waiting to be executed.
She is a trained active combatant. Now, legally, she falls into one of two categories. She is either a free woman who volunteered for the adrenaline, the adoration of the crowd, and the massive payouts, or she is a damnatus ad ludum venatorum.
Meaning a convict, but a different kind of convict.
Yes. A damnatus ad ludum was a criminal who wasn't sentenced to immediate death, but rather sentenced to serve time in a gladiatorial or hunting school. It was still a brutal life, but they were given professional training, they were armed, and if they survived their sentence in the arena for a set number of years, they could actually win their freedom.
Wow. But whether she was a free volunteer or a surviving convict, the core fact remains she is in that arena to fight, to work, and to survive, not just to suffer and die.
Precisely.
Okay, that is a profound relief. It changes her from a tragic victim of the state into a professional badass. But clearing up that mystery immediately brings us crashing into an even more blindingly obvious question.
Oh, I know where you're going with this.
If she is a highly trained, weapon-wielding professional whose life depends on her agility and survival, why in the world is she fighting a leopard topless?
It is a striking detail.
I mean, I don't know much about hunting big cats, but I have to imagine thick leather armor, or at the very least a heavy linen tunic, would be standard issue. And in fact, when you look at the other male hunters drawn in the exact same Reims Mosaic, they are wearing tunics. They are clothed.
Right.
Why is she uniquely exposed to the claws of a leopard?
This is where the investigation transitions from ancient forensics into a deep dive into the psychology of Roman spectatorship. And Roman spectatorship was a deeply toxic, highly combustible mixture of extreme, visceral violence and explicit, overt eroticism.
To understand why she is dressed, or rather undressed, the way she is, we have to talk about what the source paper refers to as the Mevia effect.
Yes, the Mevia effect.
Reading the sources, my mind immediately went to the Roman poet Juvenal.
He's the one who introduces us to Mevia, right?
Exactly. Juvenal was a famously grumpy, deeply conservative Roman satirist writing around the year 100 AD. He despised how modern, wealthy, and, in his eyes, decadent Rome was becoming.
And in his very first satire, he is complaining bitterly about all the things that annoy him in the city.
One of his chief complaints is that he is forced to watch Mavia hunting the Etruscan boar, holding the spears with one bare breast.
He is incredibly specific about that detail. She's fighting a massive, lethal wild boar, and she's doing it with one breast explicitly bared. It instantly evokes the mythological imagery of the Amazons. It does, and that was entirely the point. Mavia was arguably the most famous, most celebrated female beast hunter in Roman history.
And the academic consensus is that her specific topless or half-bare look was not a wardrobe malfunction.
Not at all. It was a highly calculated, incredibly savvy marketing choice. By deliberately baring her breast in the arena, Mavia accomplished two very important things.
First, in a massive amphitheater where thousands of people are sitting hundreds of feet away in the cheap seats, she made it visually unmistakable that they were watching a woman perform these incredibly violent, traditionally masculine acts.
The novelty of female violence was a massive draw. And second, and perhaps more importantly, it intentionally, overtly aroused the predominantly male audience.
The source paper uses a really striking analogy here. It explicitly compares Mavia to a Marilyn Monroe of the ancient world.
It's a very apt comparison, albeit a much more violent one. Mavia was a massive, polarizing sex symbol. She understood that combining the adrenaline and life-or-death stakes of lethal combat with overt sexual exhibitionism would drive the Roman crowds absolutely wild.
She wasn't just a hunter, she was a phenomenon.
She commanded the attention of the entire city, from the emperor down to the poorest citizen.
So, if Mavia was at her peak around 100 AD, and the woman in our Reims Mosaic is performing in the 3rd century, 100 or even 150 years later, is the woman in the mosaic basically doing a 3rd century cosplay of Mavia?
That is the most logical, economically sound conclusion. The arena was a business. In the entertainment world, whether it's ancient Rome or modern Hollywood, if a specific look or gimmick is proven to draw massive crowds and generate massive revenue, you copy it.
Mavia established the golden standard for what a superstar female Venatrix looked like.
And the woman in the Reims Mosaic, operating in the province of Gaul generations later, wanted to be as popular, as famous, and as highly paid as the legendary Mavia. So she adopted the exact same highly eroticized, highly dangerous topless uniform.
But wait. If she is intentionally exposing her body like this for the visual consumption and arousal of tens of thousands of strangers, what does that tell us about her actual place in society? I cannot imagine a wealthy senator's wife or a respected noblewoman going topless in the local amphitheater for cheers.
You're entirely right, she wouldn't. And this brings us to the rigid, heavily legislated social class system of Roman women. The Romans drew a very hard legal and moral line.
A respectable upper-class woman of good standing was called a femina. Her entire social currency, the honor of her family, was predicated on her modesty, her chastity, and her bodily privacy.
The woman in the mosaic, precisely because she is willfully baring her breasts for public entertainment, was almost certainly what the Romans categorized as a mulier, a woman of significantly lower social status.
So she could be a freedwoman, a slave, or just a working-class citizen trying to leverage her physical skills to survive.
Exactly. To the conservative Roman elite, her body was legally and socially available for public consumption in a way a femina's never ever would be.
But this brings us to the most fascinating, deeply contradictory part of our entire deep dive. This is the bigger cultural picture that really exposes the cracks in Roman morality.
Right.
Because the Romans absolutely loved these female hunters. The crowds cheered for Mavia. The owner of the villa in Reims loved this Venatrix so much he immortalized her in an incredibly expensive mosaic on his floor.
They couldn't get enough of them.
But at the exact same time, the Roman elite absolutely despised female gladiators. They hated the idea of women fighting women with swords so intensely that the Emperor Septimius Severus formally legally banned female gladiators in the year 200 AD.
That is correct.
So I have to ask, what is the mechanism behind this double standard? Why is it perfectly acceptable, even celebrated, for a woman to stab a leopard, but it is a legal and moral outrage for her to stab another woman?
It all comes down to the deeply ingrained stories the Romans told themselves about what was natural and what was unnatural. And to understand that, we have to unpack a fundamental Roman legal and social concept called infamia.
Infamia, literally infamy or a loss of reputation.
Yes, but it was much heavier than just a bad reputation. Infamia was a profound moral stain, a literal legal downgrading of your rights as a citizen. In Roman society, bodily autonomy and dignity were paramount. If you earned your living by subjecting your body to the whims of the crowd or by spilling human blood for entertainment, you were branded with infamia.
Gladiators, prostitutes, and stage actors all shared this exact same despised legal status. They were entirely outside the bounds of respectable society.
And even the male gladiators felt the psychological weight of this.
Right. When I was looking into the background of this, I read about Artemidorus, who recounts a dream a gladiator had, where the man is consumed with a deep psychological remorse because he literally feeds on the flesh and blood of his fellow humans. The stigma was crushing.
The stigma of killing another human for sport was immensely heavy. But here's the crucial defining difference. Killing animals did not carry that same deep moral stain.
To the Roman philosophical mind, beasts existed entirely for human utility.
Even the Emperor Marcus Aurelius, who was a famous Stoic philosopher, and was deeply disgusted by the sheer cruelty of human-on-human gladiatorial combat, drew a line. He temporarily banned gladiators from using sharp metal swords, forcing them to fight with blunt wooden weapons.
But Marcus Aurelius, the great humanitarian philosopher, never banned the animal hunts. The slaughter of thousands of beasts was seen as a demonstration of human mastery over chaotic nature.
Exactly.
Okay, so the act of hunting itself was less morally stained than gladiatorial combat. But why was it specifically acceptable for women to participate? Because generally speaking, Roman women were not encouraged to be violent in any capacity.
This is the genius of Roman cognitive dissonance. It's a concept we can call the Diana loophole.
The Diana loophole.
The Romans lacked any respectable, positive, mythological precedent for women fighting with the sword. If a female gladiator stepped into the arena, the only cultural touchstone the Romans had for her was an Amazon.
And to the patriarchal Roman mindset, the Amazons were not cool, empowering heroes. They were terrifying, unnatural abominations. They represented a society turned entirely upside down, where women abandoned their natural domestic duties to act like savage men.
Therefore, a female gladiator was seen as a monstrous threat to the social order.
But hunting was different.
Hunting was entirely different because it had a pristine, divine precedent. Diana, the goddess of the hunt, was one of the most respected, chaste, and powerful deities in the entire Roman pantheon. She ran through the woods with her bow and her hounds, slaying beasts.
You also had Atalanta, the great mythological heroine who drew first blood in the hunt for the Caledonian boar.
Therefore, if a Roman woman picked up a spear or a whip and stepped into the arena to fight a leopard, she wasn't an unnatural, society-destroying monster. She was merely emulating a beloved goddess.
It is an absolute masterclass in how a society weaponizes morality to justify its own appetites. The elite could sit in the stands and say, oh no, you absolutely cannot have a sword to fight another woman. That is unnatural. That destroys the dignity of Roman womanhood.
Right.
But please, by all means, take off your top, grab a whip, and go fight that leopard just like the goddess Diana. We find that very respectable. It is wildly hypocritical.
It perfectly encapsulates how public morality is so often just a convenient, respectable mask for public appetite. The Romans claimed to be protecting the moral sanctity of women by banning female gladiators, but they eagerly subsidized and cheered for topless female hunters because it fed their adrenaline and their erotic desires.
The morality was just the packaging. The spectacle was always the product.
Well said.
So, bringing all of these threads together, we've looked at the drawings, the anatomy, the weapons, the clothing, and the deep cultural psychology. What is the ultimate big picture takeaway from Alfonso Manas' forensic work on the lost Reims Mosaic?
The massive historical impact is that this single, miraculously preserved image radically changes our understanding of women's endurance in ancient history. Because the Reims Mosaic is definitively dated to the 3rd century, it provides hard, undeniable proof that female arena fighters did not simply disappear when the emperor banned female gladiators in 200 AD.
The Venatrices, operating safely under the Diana loophole, survived the purge.
They kept fighting, they kept hunting, and they kept entertaining the masses for at least another entire century, if not longer. This one woman, frozen in ink, holding her whip, proves that the female presence in the hyper-violent, hyper-masculine world of the arena was far more resilient than we ever knew.
If the absolute only visual record of female beast hunters was found not in Rome, but in a remote provincial city in Gaul, and if it only survived by pure blind chance through a forgotten Victorian-era sketch, How many other unshakable rules of ancient history are we completely, totally wrong about?
It's staggering to think about.
What other firmly established facts are we clinging to simply because the physical evidence that would prove us wrong was bombed, burned, paved over, or never drawn down in the first place? Think
Right.
about it. What other invisible women, what other unbelievable stories are still waiting out there right now, hidden beneath the soil and the lost mosaics of the past?
It makes you wonder how much of history is just the silence of the things that didn't survive the bombing.
Think about that amphitheater again. The blazing sun, the smell of the sand, the pacing leopard. She was there. She was real. And for over 100 years, she was nothing more than a ghost in a forgotten book. Until next time, thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive.
Heliox is produced by Michelle Brucker and Scott Bleakley. It features reviews of emerging research and ideas from leading thinkers, curated under their creative direction with AI assistance for voice, imagery, and composition. Systemic voices and illustrative images of people are representative tools, not depictions of specific individuals. Thanks for listening today. 4 recurring narratives underlie every episode: boundary dissolution, adaptive complexity, embodied knowledge, and quantum-like uncertainty. These aren't just philosophical musings, but frameworks for understanding our modern world. We hope you continue exploring our other episodes, responding to the content, and checking out our related articles at helioxpodcast.substack.com.